And I stand here today and tell you it matters to me. And so, but I believe, back to the very beginning of our nation, we have had men that serve their country for all the right reasons. And so I believe it is incumbent upon our nation to convince men and women around this country that it is time. We need people serving for the right reasons. You know, I'm asked a lot, and we're gonna get to some questions, and I want you to kind of understand how I feel and our views. But I've learned that if you know about me as an individual, and you know about my worldview, how I view things, then it really should help you understand how I would fall on any particular issue. I raise all four of my children because I have a consistent view of how I view the world. And so there's that consistency. And so our father, and it's great to have Dad with us on this swing. And I'll tell you, the older I get, the smarter my mom and Dad get. So it's a great opportunity to have Dad with us. And I brought my brother Tim. I know he's right here. When we're heading over to big timber country, I've got to have our family lager on the bus. So it's nice to have them here. But I wanted you to understand our worldview. And really in understanding our worldview as Sutherlands, you can understand how we reached our decision last year to run. Last year, early part of the year, I had fulfilled many commitments that I had made to our community. I had chaired the Chamber of Commerce, which was a 7-year commitment. I had chaired the Military Affairs Committee. Many of you know we have 2 military bases in Bay County, and so I worked and served them to the best of my ability as the chairman of that very large committee, learning about our military installations and how critical their missions are to our national security, as well as the economic boost that they give to our economy in Congressional District 2. I had served our community as Jeb Bush appointed me to chair the Early Learning Coalition of Northwest Florida, and we were responsible through that operation to care for our kids in 7 counties, providing VPK and school readiness education for children from birth to 5, to make sure that children, and many of them were at or below 150% of the poverty level, to make sure that those children that weren't born, many of them in a home like me and Tim and our brothers and sisters were, but that those children would be ready to learn by the time they started first grade. So they understood their colors, and they understood their letters and their numbers. And so for 4.5 years, I was honored to have the trust of Governor Bush, and I fulfilled that commitment last year. And so last year, I rotated off several boards, several commitments that I had made in serving our community, because our dad has always taught us that when you live in a community, you pay your civic rent. You give back to that community. And we've learned in Bay County for 5 generations that even though we think that sometimes we serve a lot, we're running in a lot of different directions, we can never give the people of our community back more than what they have given us. They have blessed us, and they have trusted us. And so last year, with basically going back into our business and running our business after being so busy in our community, last year I began to read, and I began to be a little bit more cognizant of things that were happening on a national scale. And I began inside of my personal time and my quiet times, I began to feel a movement, a gravitational pull that I have always known, because I was born and raised into a Christian home where God was always the standard. I cut my teeth on a church pew. I know the expectation. And I'll tell you, it's a high expectation. I promise you folks, if I can meet Mama's expectation, I will please you as your representative. Okay, so I will say this though, last year, as I began to contemplate and feel this gravitational pull in a direction that at first I ignored. At first I realized that this was going to change my life, if this was the direction that God was leading me. And so I, kind of like Jonah, I ran a little bit from the direction. And then after a while, I came back to my roots. I came back to my senses, and I realized that I was not going to spend 3 days in the belly of a fish. And I realized, I say that in joking, but I realized that if there is a command of you, if there is an expectation of you, then it requires your obedience. And so we finally, as a family, and I say a family where there's 21 of us immediate members of our family, the 21 of us, mom and dad, me and my brothers, my sisters, their spouses, the 11 grandchildren that are the next generation that we have to give freedom to, the 21 of us made a decision. And everybody had a veto. I went to every one of my siblings and I said, you single-handedly could prevent this from happening. So everybody, I did not want to do this apart from having an inner peace that passeth all understanding, that I knew would stay with me at night when I tried to sleep. And I didn't want to do this without that. And secondly, I didn't want to do this without question. Total unanimous decision among the 21 people that I consider the closest to me in my life. So, with their support and that of the God that I love, I believe that we are now out of the boat and we are walking on the water. And all the things that come with that, nervousness, scared, excitement, exhilaration, being terrified, being, I'm feeling all those emotions. I'm out in perhaps the most scrutinized arena that one would ever find themselves in. I know that October the 21st of last year, when we announced our intentions, a big bullseye was put on my head. And I understand that there are people that vehemently disagree with everything that I'm going to share with you. But the problem with that is they disagree with who I am. They disagree with what I am. And I believe that when people disagree with who you are and what you are, and they want to destroy everything you stand for, that there's a time that you leave your family and you go to war and you go fight. And so therefore, we made that decision based on the fact that we had enough. And that term, that little slogan, kind of stuck with us. And it's resonating across this district. As I talk and I see people shake their heads and I see people look at me and talk to me about how their businesses are failing, their families are struggling, their Social Security checks are not being able to be stretched enough to cover the rise in their energy costs, the rise in their rent, the rise in their gas prices, the rise in their food prices, and yet they still have that same amount of money on a fixed income to meet all the needs of their life. And it got to the point to where it burned me up when I realized that a lot of the pain that we're seeing today, a lot of the pain that we all are experiencing today, is man-made. Is man-made. And so I believe that that which has been man-made can be man undone. But I believe that the unemployment figures, the government spending, the passing of cap and trade, the health care bill, and we'll get into some of those things. But I want you to know that those issues all represent two different philosophies. There's a philosophy that we were grown in, raised up in our home. And it was the responsibility, it is personal responsibility, that nowhere in our life, at no point in our life, will we ever say that our plight in life we owe to somebody else's decision. We are where we are because of the decisions we made. We will never be a victim. We will create our future, we will make our future, and we will thank the God who led us there, but we will not blame anyone else for our plight in life. And that is the responsibility that our Father taught us as kids. Versus an entitlement mentality. Versus a mentality that there is an expectation that someone, something, owes you something. This world owes you nothing. Nothing. In our family, you either work or you don't eat. I shared with the group earlier when we were kids, and Tim certainly can attest to this. When we were kids in our family business, Dad didn't pay a maid service. Dad didn't pay a lawn service. Dad didn't pay a car detail service to come watch those cars. And he didn't pay anybody to vacuum the floors and take out the trash. That's what he had children to do. And we realized, he made us understand that as long as we were taken from the table, we had to be putting something on the table. And so therefore, when we did that, I always had a brand new ball glove, I always had cleats or a baseball bat or a football when I needed one. Tim and I always had 20 gauge shells for our shotguns. We always had hooks and lures for our